listening to the Metal Command Podcast.
Greetings, everybody, and welcome back to the Metal Command Podcast. Tony here with you, and today I am here to bring you an interview with myself and guitar player Dean Wells from the band Teramaze. Teramaze, of course, is a progressive heavy metal band from Australia, and they have a new album out called Eli, A Wonderful Fall from Grace, which I think is excellent and definitely one of the top 2 or 3 albums they have ever done. So with that being said, this is the interview with myself and Dean Wells from Teramaze. If you like what you see in here, of course, you can follow the show on Facebook, or you can check out the show and subscribe to the channel here on YouTube. With that said, here's the interview with myself and Dean Wells from Teramaze. Welcome back to the Metal Command Show, everybody. I have Dean Wells, guitar player from Teramaze, as everybody knows from me posting on the site. And of course, in the past, Dean has been on my show, and I've always been a very big fan of his music since I got into the band almost 10 years ago now. It feels like it was forever ago, but definitely started checking you guys out when I first heard the album Anhedonia. And so a lot of the music has changed a lot in a very good way since that record. So it's great to have you back on, man, and really liking this new album.
Thanks for having me, man. Yeah, appreciate that. So, yeah.
So let's talk about this record. So I saw a post, I'm going to start this off, where you almost deleted it. and talk about that, because I think this album is probably, in my opinion, one of the better ones that you've put out, you know, over the course of this band's existence.
It's absolutely true. Usually what happens, I suppose, with me, because I'm working on it every day, from the writing to the production to the mixing to the mastering, and then the videos, and then everything that comes with it. I mean, the guys help out a bit, but when it comes to the production, I'm my own doing that. And after like 20 months from when we started writing it to when it was actually finished, I never want to hear it again, sort of thing. It kind of happens pretty much with every album, because it's what happens these days is, you know, you sort of got to do everything yourself. And I do, you know, I produce other bands and stuff, so. But I just didn't like the album. It's really weird. Like, how can I explain it? Even though I wrote the song, part of me was like, and I've been trying to figure out why, because I was very much like, I'd rather just delete it, because we've got 20 other songs I've got that sound nothing like this album. And I suppose, I'm not even trying to sound arrogant, it's like the style of the band's changed a lot. And the style of what we write right now is not what Eli kind of is. As much as it might sound sort of fresh, to me, I had to kind of go back. The idea of it was I had to go back in my head to go, well, I didn't want it to sound like Her Halo, but I kind of did, if that makes sense. I wanted that to feel like it was part of I wanted it to feel like it was the start of the story, so it had to feel somewhat like Her Halo. And I suppose when we did Sorella, which was only a couple of years ago, a 26-minute song was kind of taxing on ideas. So, and with Sorella, it was almost, we were using little nuggets and little riffs and stuff from Her Halo, where Eli was just a whole brand new thing. And I suppose even part of the fantasy of it, the story part of it, is not something that we do a lot. So it's a completely different headspace to kind of go, I need this to, like, I wanted to do the best I could for the story, where usually the difference is any song that's not from, say, Her Halo or Sorella, I'm just writing how I feel.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like if I'm listening to something at the time, it could be anything from whatever, like Slipknot or Dream Theater. I'm just writing stuff that makes me feel, you know, happy, like, or whatever, you know what I mean? But Eli had to change the way that I felt and went, this has to make sense to the story. And I suppose in the end, I worked so hard on it that I was exhausted by the sound of it. Almost like the best way I tried to explain it to someone without sounding like arrogant or anything was like, if you've ever been drunk on a certain drink, a whiskey or a beer, and you were sick, you can never smell that again. Mm-hmm. And when you do, you're like, get it away from me. That's exactly how I felt at the end of the album. I couldn't hear it again. I was just like, oh, just get this album away from me. Like, I'm proud of it, but it's like for me to hear it, it's taken me a little bit to kind of want to hear it again, because I feel like I almost overdid it. Probably not almost. I think I did, as in I didn't really take many breaks from it. I mean, we went to Europe. If we didn't go to Europe and play, I'll guarantee you I was going to delete it. I just didn't want to hear it. I kind of just didn't want to hear it, and I kind of didn't want to put it out because I was like, well, it makes me feel sick. And really, like, we're the only judge of our music. Like, if we like it, we'll release it. If we don't, we're not going to, because it's, you know, it's like, you know, it's our life. It's like, this is what we want to put out, or this is not what we want to put out. And for me, I was like, I don't want anyone to hear this, because it's like, I don't want them to feel the way I'm feeling. It's kind of strange, man. But it was that, like, oh, don't drink that drink again. Like, I was sick, but, you know, no one else feels like that, just you.
Right.
So I'm sort of glad you asked that, because we put that up. And it was like, the guys still think it's sort of funny. But it happens a little bit every album, but this one just felt like it was really like, I don't want to hear it anymore. I don't want to hear it ever again. Actually, that's how I got. Like, I don't play it. And now we're relearning the songs to play live, and I'm like, oh, this is a kind of cool song. I've had a bit of a break from it.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from, because, you know, it's kind of another analogy would be, let's say the last thing you ate before you got really sick, like the flu or something like that, and then it's hard to, like, want to go back and eat that again or drink that again. You know, with a record, and I've been there before, if you are somebody that's actively participating in it nonstop, and you are nonstop going through track by track, mixing an album, you know, you're composing the songs, you're mixing the record, and then you're doing test mixes. Do I like these levels? Do I not? And then you're going through that nonstop, and all you're doing is living and breathing that record. And if you're spending 20 months on it, that's a lot, and so many hours on this thing. Even if you have, you know, producing other bands, right? And you get a little bit of a break, you're still getting back into that album again. And it's funny you mentioned what you did, because when I think of what you just said, you know, when you go in and you start, you know, mixing your own album or participating in producing an album, the thing that's crazy about it is you might think, oh, I was only in this room for an hour. Then you look and you've been in there for like 7 hours. And so I totally get where you were coming from. But at the same time, I got to be honest with you. I followed your music for quite a long time, and this is one of the better albums you've put out. I mean, and in all honesty, it's probably one of my top 2 or 3 albums that you've done. In a lot of ways, you know, like when I'll give you an example. A favorite song of mine on here is "Standing Ovation." I thought that song was just, you know, like in the very beginning, you kind of had this prog, almost this like distorted Deep Purple, you know, keyboard vibe in the beginning, but it almost sounds like something like a continuation of Her Halo. That was like the biggest thing that I noticed about that track when I was listening to this record. And then the And then the last song on the album, which is probably my favorite one, 13-minute epic at the end, I thought was awesome. And, I think when you get into it, you think to yourself, you get so burned out by it, but then you get people like myself and others that have heard it for the first time.
Yeah.
And you don't think that. But I thought the post was funny because the reason I brought it up is I can relate to it. Probably the best thing.
Yeah, it's a, I don't know, maybe it's just an artist thing, and maybe part of it is that we've released like 5 albums or something in the last couple of years, so maybe a slight bit of burnout in there. I don't know, actually. I don't really I can get burnt out, but not usually on music. I can get burnt out on production. Music's sort of, I'll just pick up a guitar and like write a song. It's like it feels easy, like feels natural. It's almost like a therapy every time I do it. But production and trying to get something to sound like Her Halo's a great sounding album. I mean, I produced it, but Jacob Hansen, who's like one of the best in the world, mixed it. It's a great sounding album. So part of me was like, this has got to sound somewhere in that ballpark. It's got to, and we did that with a label, a pretty big label in that. And this one was on our own, and we're like, well, everything needs to be. Everything feels like. I suppose there was I put an expectation on myself that probably I didn't have in the last couple of albums, because it felt like, well, it wasn't so much a continuation of Her Halo; it's the start. So we went backwards. So that's why we brought Dave Holly, the keyboard player, back in, because even the sounds that he uses. I mean, me and Chris wrote a fair bit of the keys as well, but that's what we do when we write the songs. But Dave has some actually older sounds, like older sort of Dream Theater or Wake sort of sounds, and we don't use those sounds. We haven't used them since Her Halo. So even having those keys, and he's playing the bits of piano and that in the song, made it feel like Her Halo. And also, like, not that it was really much part of the promotion and stuff, that we hired the drummer from Her Halo, which was Dean Kennedy. He actually played on Esoteric as well, and he joined after Anadonia, so we're old friends, to do the drums on the album, to try to capture the sound of Her Halo, but with brand new songs and not trying to copy the songwriting. So that Standing Ovation, I can't remember if that was one of the first. It might have been one of the first songs. I knew instantly, I'm like, this feels right. It feels like, part of this story. I didn't want it to be disconnected. And I suppose that's the hardest thing about Eli, was trying to make it its own album, that if you've never heard the band before and you just put Eli on, it's like, oh, this is cool, I like this or I don't like this, whatever. You don't have to hear Her Halo or Sorella to make any sense of them. But so there's a lot going on in my head, other than just even the songwriting. The actual song, A Wonderful Fall from Grace, is my favorite too, but it was the hardest song by far. I had almost probably, I don't know, nearly 20 minutes of music in a Pro Tools session, and I was trying to make sense of this song. I kind of wanted it to feel a little bit, I don't know, like Moulin Rouge or something, like a little bit, I don't know what you call it, bit theatrical, obviously. And trying to piece all the bits together, it's one of the songs that nearly beat me. And I like the challenge of trying to, piece a song together. Like, so I'll write parts and then I'll just move them around. And then I think, oh, that needs an extra whatever. But this long song, I edited it probably 20 times. I'm like, oh, this is just doing my head in. And then one day I come back and just went chop, 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 and sort of pushed it back together and went, oh, this makes sense now. And the song had this sort of, but I wanted it to feel like you don't really know what's coming next as well, without boring the listener. So that song was probably part of but really sort of wore me out. But I love that song. It's my favorite
Yeah.
song. So it's kind of,
So with all the parts that you took out of it, can you make a completely different song out of it?
probably. Oh yeah.
Been down
Probably.
that road before quite a few
I,
times.
I would have. I've got. What's funny is I've got like folders of other songs that are like 15 minutes long and stuff that we could release them as Teramaze songs, but I just don't think they're good enough for. I don't know what it is. Like, I've got so much music that I usually just like writing brand new stuff. So I might have a folder of. Well, I do. I got folders of songs, and I'll keep them there. But I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. What can I come up with today? And I was like, yeah, there's a riff, and I put a drum beat down and a vocal line. I'm like, this is fresh. This makes me feel. This is why I like writing music. I love that initial brand new. It's that always brand new. What can come from silence? You know what I mean? And just my head sort of thing. So I never usually go backwards and pull out old songs that I didn't like at the time. And happens sometimes, pretty rare. But I got a lot. I've probably got easy 2 albums worth of music that I don't know if I would release because they're not really 100%. You know what I mean? They're sort of like 60% or whatever. And I'm like, I don't like it at the time. But sometimes I'll go back and hear a song again and go, I think it needs a better chorus or something. And then all of a sudden the song's brand new. But I love the fresh. Yeah, it's just something brand new. Like every day I always try to write something. I was taught that when I was doing songwriting for like Australian Idol and TV and stuff. It's like you can write something every day. It doesn't mean it's going to be great, but just put it down. Put the ideas down. And I end up with so many ideas that I'm just like, it gets a bit daunting to go back and look at them all. So I'm like, what am I going to do with this stuff? And then I'll write something else, and then I'll go with that. So it's all about how I feel at the time. It's got nothing. It literally got nothing to do with anything else. No, like, well, even Eli, we didn't plan this. I was chatting to Dave, our keyboard player, because we're all friends and stuff. He sent me this little piano thing that was actually the main line in or middle of Her Halo or the start of Ordinary Dream or something. I can't remember. And he goes, he goes, I thought you'd like this. And in my head, I instantly went, I could turn that into a song. And that song become Hands Are Tied, the ballad. Yep. So that
third favorite song on the album.
That's where it started. That one little bit of piano. It was that. You'd know the melody. It's literally the first melody in Hands Are Tied. Mm-hmm. That's one of the only melodies that we took from Her Halo. But that sparked the whole album. And I was just like, all right. I went away for like 3 days and took my acoustic guitar and then just wrote all these little riffs and stuff on my phone, come back, and I had like all the bases of all the songs.
Yeah.
Just sparked from that one little idea. That happens a lot in the band. Like, so I don't know what your question was. I've just lost it.
The funny thing is the last 3 songs on this album are my favorite ones. It's like as you get into it, I think the record gets better. And those last 3 songs are like awesome. But the funny thing is, when you listen to the album and you're listening to the songs, like I would never want them to be the first 3. Like they fit in that order where they should be. Not saying the rest of the album isn't all that great, but what I'm saying is that they just fit so well together. They just flow together. And I remember when I first listened to this, when I first heard the promo for this record, and I'm listening to it and kind of going through it, there's always a moment, if there's an album that you like, you kind of just sort of stop what you're doing. Because when I'm listening to stuff, I'm either driving or, I'm doing something else, and maybe I'm editing photos, whatever I'm doing. And I remember when Standing Ovation came on, and I started listening to it, and then I immediately kind of stopped to pay attention. And then I paid attention to the last 3 tracks, Hands Are Tied, and obviously, the title track. And those three were just like, they flowed so well. And I think as an album, and I kind of, like I said, as an album, I think the way that you have this thing, the way it flows, I think is great, in all honesty. But definitely, I think definitely you hit a home run on this, as we say here.
Thanks.
Even if you were going to almost delete it.
Yeah, it's a weird.
Yeah, even if Spotify says it doesn't cost anything to make records. I saw you just commented on that.
That stuff makes me laugh. I'm like, I know lots of musicians, lots of bands, lots of songwriters, lots of producers. And I'm like, if I did look at my own life, I've spent my whole life getting to the point where I can spend 20 months writing an album that he thinks doesn't cost anything. It's literally cost me my whole kind of life. You know what I mean? It's like, you can't even put a price on it. I didn't read the story. There could be some sort of, I get that you can do things cheaper these days. You can release things there because we release things ourselves.
Sure.
Cost a little bit of money, but the price of honing your skills and producing an album, you know what I mean? Like, if I didn't produce this album, that would have cost us probably 20 grand. Easy.
Yeah.
Easy. And the film clips. And like would have been 30 grand. Something like that. You know what I mean? It's like, and we're not, we're not a big band. So you go up to bigger bands and I know their budgets, you know what I mean? It's like
I mean, think of how much an album costs for Jacob Hansen to mix it, right?
No, exactly.
It's not cheap.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Jacob Hansen, Andy Sneap, any of these guys that mix records, I can tell you that it is not cheap at all.
You get a song mixed by Chris Lord-Alge, I think is American too. I think it's like $3,500-4,000 a song, American. So that for us is about nearly $6,000. He's worth it, but I'm like, do that over an album, it's $60,000 to mix the album.
Yeah.
And I'm like, then there's the production of the album. You know what I mean? Like, who's the moron that they're doing that to almost make out that, what you do is not worth anything to us, writers and stuff. I'm like, well, I mean, at the moment, that doesn't bother me. I'm not going to, I'll just do what I do. But if I wrote down, if I put a price on everything that we just do, like, and someone had to pay for it, you know what I mean? You're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. Easy, especially over the last 5-6 years. You know what I mean? It's like, there's artwork, there's all sorts of stuff. It's a kind of crazy thing to say, but, Spotify is one of those things. I mean, our music's on there. I don't mind it. But if the guy owns it's going to say stuff like, it doesn't cost anything though.
Right.
So,
well, I read the article.
Nothing.
Yeah, I read the article, and now he's kind of sort of trying to backtrack that statement, like trying to pretend that he didn't say it, because there's other articles that have him kind of like, because a lot of things are clickbait. You know what I'm saying? But that is, I think the way that I took it, first of all, the way that I took it is that maybe it doesn't cost a band to put stuff on the site, right?
But that costs us a few $100s.
Yeah, so I didn't know. I don't know the particulars of how that works.
I can tell you exactly if you want to know, because he would charge. Man, you can put up an album, and I don't know, it's about $150 or something like that. But then if you want to release if you want to release 3 songs that are already being paid for, you have to pay again, like $70-80.
Okay.
So, and think about the millions of bands that are doing that. And it doesn't matter who the band is. That's always, you got to pay that. Always got to pay that. So, well, actually, it's not so much Spotify. It's the distribution. It's the digital distributors sending it to Spotify.
Right.
You can't just put your song on Spotify. If there was a file where I could go to the Teramaze page and go upload now and go click and it just uploads, then that'd be great. But we have to all go through some sort of digital distribution. The labels, I think, go through things like Warner and stuff, but
yeah,
not on label. You have to go through CD Baby, DistroKid, and they all cost money. So
sure.
It's just funny. But yeah, man, yeah.
As someone that, produces music, I want to get your thoughts on this. There's been more and more talk of people using AI in music and producing it. And, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's a misunderstood thing? Do you think it's a good thing? Do you think it's a bad thing? What are your thoughts on AI and, in music or in art in general?
I kind of really don't know yet. It's sort of like I see it floating around and blah, blah, blah. A lot of the artwork, this is kind of weird, and maybe it's just me, but when I look at a lot of the AI art, it makes me feel sick. And I don't know why. It makes me feel uneasy. It's almost like something's too perfect about it. There's something, the lighting, it makes me feel like nauseous. So the art itself, I don't. If you use it, whatever. People are going to do what they're going to do. The music side of it, from my perspective, it doesn't bother me unless it starts writing Teramaze songs. And if it does, then that's a new challenge for me. And I'm like, I'll beat you. Do you know what I mean? In my head, I've already thought about that. I'm like, if it starts with writing Teramaze songs, I'm like, okay, well, then I'm going to have to beat a machine to write my own music. That until that point, I'm like, whatever. I mean, you can't change what technology is going to do, and you can't change what people are going to do. You know what I mean? Your own. If it's affecting you, then you have to improvise. You got to go around it. And in my head, I love a challenge. Ever since I was a kid, I was I'd like playing the top teams. I love the pressure of things. I do my best work in anything I do when there's a lot of pressure. If there's no pressure, I'm useless. I just feel like I'm nah. Like someone says, "Oh, you got to give me a song in 5 minutes." I'm like, "All right, I'll be able to do it." But if they said, "If you got to give me a song in 6 months," I'll be like, whatever, and I'll leave it to the last minute.
Yeah,
it's so I love the pressure. So that's how I've looked at AI. I'm like, if that comes from what I do as a producer and more as a songwriter, then in my head, I'm going to have to beat it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, all right, you can write our songs for us. It's stupid, but that's the only way I'm looking at it. Because it's not like I can go and stop it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to promote it because I think it's, what I think AI is probably going to destroy everything, but who cares? It's until that point, I'm going to do what I do and try to be the best at that.
Yeah.
And if that wants to try to compete with me for some reason, then that's going to be a new challenge that might be interesting.
be like Skynet is trying to clone Dean Wells.
Yeah. So it's just you kind of, that's the as an artist, I'll see it as a challenge. Some people might get discouraged by it, I'm sure, but at the same time, it might weed out who really wants to do music.
Yeah.
And who wants to actually push the point and hone their skills and try to constantly outdo themselves.
Yeah.
That's my view of. That's why I do what I do, is because I love the challenge of trying to outdo myself. I don't care what anyone else is doing. I look at bands doing great things and blah, 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 but it doesn't faze me. It's like if I can better what I just did yesterday, then that makes me want to kind of, be alive. It makes me it keeps me inspired. So I don't have to compete with anyone else and compete with myself. I've got enough music now to kind of look at and go, oh, wonder if I could do that again or do it better. So, you know, I build this tension to try to outdo myself, and no one gets harmed, sort of.
Yeah.
Other than that.
Just don't delete your albums.
Yeah, well, the reason behind the deleting of it is, firstly, I didn't want to hear it again.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to ever hear it again. I didn't want to have to learn the songs, like relearn them. Even though I like wrote every riff on it, it's like I got to relearn what I did, because a lot of it's like I just write it and then we record it, and there's been no time where I've actually sat and played the song from start to finish. Or a solo, I might do like an improvisation. I'll keep it and I'll go, okay, next, what's next? Oh, I've got to do the vocals. I won't even play that solo again for like 2 years.
Yeah.
So there's no almost muscle memory. It's not like I'm sitting there like, well, I obviously work out the riffs, but once I've figured the riff out or the section, I sort of go, right, that's it. And I record it and done. I've never played it again until we're relearning. So there's that. It's like, and the other part of it was like, I think I can write better. In my head, I was like, I think I could write better than Eli, because at the time I didn't like it because it made me feel shit. And this is all, you know, someone might just say it's artsy stuff, but it's what goes through my head. And it's like, well, I can write better songs. So I've probably got 18 new songs already, like, that don't sound anything like Eli.
Yeah.
They sound more like what we were doing, but maybe slightly heavier and a little bit more modern, without the sort of classic keys and the long sort of aggressive stuff. So,
do you ever write a bunch of songs and you think this is going to be a great album, and then you're like, you know what, I think I can do better, and you kind of shelf them in that folder you were talking about, and then write another 8 or 9 songs? I'm like, okay, I like this a lot better. Does that ever happen to you?
It happens all the time.
Yeah,
like all the time. The songs working on now. Well, it's actually, I suppose, because Eli was over 20 months, which is actually a long time for us. In that time, the songs were written in about 2 months, but the production and everything took a long time.
Yeah.
In that time, because I'm in my studio, I could be working on like the drum sound or something, and I get sick of it. So I'll pick up the guitar and start recording something. And I'm usually, if I opened up my sessions for Eli, at the end of each song, there's all these riffs. Because I'm in the session, I'm like, I better just throw this riff idea down. So I open up Standing Ovation. There could be a whole, 4 different riffs that I was writing at the time while I was working on like the vocals or something. It's like, so I go through and find all these little seeds of songs, put them in a folder. And so I wrote a heap of other songs while producing Eli that don't sound anything like Eli, because Eli was already done. So it was like, I was always like, I want something a bit heavier or a little bit more chaotic, and that's why I write so much. While I'm producing, I record ideas. I was taught when I worked for producers that you can always write something. And it doesn't mean it's going to be great. 9 times out of 10 may not be, but the 10th one might be like something cool, and you go, right, I'm going to turn that into a song. So that goes with that writer's block. I've never had writer's block in my life. I don't understand it. I think writer's block is just being lazy. It's like, oh, I can't write anything. Just write anything then. Just write whatever. Doesn't mean it has to be amazing. Most things I write are just a riff. It's like you can't even hear the song. It's just could be just a beat too. But you start growing it and adding little things to it, and you got a band and like send it to the singer. It's like, you got an idea? It's like, yeah, I've got something for that. Or by the time they've sent back an idea, I might have another idea, and then we've got 2 ideas, and then it starts building up like that. So
yeah,
I don't understand writer's block. Yeah, I'm not saying everything I write's good, but I've got lots of folders of stuff that I don't think is very good, but I don't release that because I don't think it's good. Someone else might like it, but if you don't like it, why release it?
I totally, I get it. A lot of times you'll you'll come up with a part in your head and you're like, man, this could be really cool. And then you record it. And then you're like, you go back and listen to it. I don't know, like a couple days later. Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. I didn't really like that very much. And I guess when you do that, you know, eventually you come upon something that where you're like, man, there's like something you write that sticks into your head, and then you just can't get that out of your head. And then you're like, that's it. You know, you might have recorded 10 or 12 or 13 ideas, and then all of a sudden you find one or two of them that really, really stand out. And then you kind of build on that. At least that's how I've always approached it. And you know, I have songs that I've done where I've sang on them, and there's like 5, 6 different kinds of vocal melodies that I'll put on there. And you're kind of like, man, you go to like the first one, you're like, what was I thinking when I did that? Right. And then all of a sudden you get to like the 5th or 6th one, and you're like, yeah. And you're like, man, and it's something you didn't like at first, but then you start listening to it and you're like, man, you know what? I really do like this. So you kind of just go through that. And sometimes you can use elements from different things that you've done and kind of mesh it together. And I think the more ideas you put down and that you record, I think the better your songs are going to be, because then you have so many ideas. It's almost like brainstorming, and then you find things that just work really well together. So I totally get where you're coming from on that. And I think anybody that listens or watches the show, I mean, they're going to understand. If they're a songwriter, they'll understand that. I'm sure lots of people, like, I've never had writer's block, like you say. I just, first thing that comes to mind, next thing that comes to mind, and then you go back and listen to it, and then you evaluate it. That's how I've always done it.
Then you can write 10 shit songs. You still wrote songs. Yeah. So it's not writer's block. But maybe amongst those 10, there could be one really, really amazing ones. Like, that's what you were trying to get. Sometimes you just got to get a lot of, because I'm just self-taught. I've never had any lessons in anything, production, singing, guitar. So I don't really know what I'm doing. Like, I know, you know, some scales and that, but I don't rely on any sort of theory for anything. It's just purely a feel, sometimes more of a color thing. Like, if it just feels, if it's the wrong color, I feel like it's just, I don't want to do that. That's how I go by. The band loves it because they don't know what they're going to get from me every day. I know that, but I know at the same time they think I'm nuts. But I don't know any other way to do it, because I'm not sitting there going, oh, well, that's a C major 7th with a flat 5, and you can't do that. Like, yeah. I understand. I was just like, this is what I want there. If I want an ugly sounding chord, I'm going to put it in there. So, like, I suppose there's that, you know, I've got no problem with people that learn theory, but I just don't do anything by theory. It's got to be in there somewhere, but I don't, it's not like it's at the front of my mind. It's just like, I can hear it in my head. I pick the guitar up and go, bah, 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 bah. That's what I want. That's the sound I wanted. Or sometimes I work at that sort of, you know, just to get the rhythm, and then bang, record it. And then that's it. Start from there. It's like, whatever. Sure. But, yeah, go.
The album, how has it been received on your end? Like, how have people received the album? Like, you know, what kind of reviews are you getting? I don't read a lot of music reviews, and the reason being is that I want to form my own opinion and not, you know, from the get-go. So I don't really read a lot of that. But how's the reception been?
It's been good. Reviews are funny because they're like, it's just, yeah, like you just said, it's someone's opinion on the sound. Some people will go, oh, it's 10 out of 10. And someone was like, yeah, it's okay. I'm like, that's cool. None of them, like, it's nice, I suppose, for promotion to kind of go, oh, look, we got 10 out of 10 or something. But not everyone's going to like it. But the fans that we have, it seems like a lot of people love this style that we do. But on sales wise, there's albums that it seems like the album's doing well, and it is, and people like it. But I sort of step back and go, well, is it doing really well? And I'll look back at the other albums we've done on our own, and I Wonder is still the most popular one we've done outside of a label. And I'm like, oh, okay. But it feels like it's bigger. Like, it's weird. It's like, it feels like it's getting more coverage.
Mm-hmm.
Eli feels like more coverage, but it's something like I Wonder sold more. So, and as there's no, who knows? You know, I mean, it's sort of like it doesn't change anything. But it seems like most of our fans like this style. But what I've learned with Teramaze is it feels like our fan base is sort of divided. They like some like the heavier, some like the little bit more poppier stuff, some like the long progressive stuff. Um, so it's hard to know if like just everyone likes it that follows the band, or just just a pile of them that love her Halo and Sorella and blah blah. But then there's the ones that come in from Anadonia and Are We Soldiers and Esoteric that's slightly heavier. So it's hard to know. We just sort of got, not that we're sort of sitting there counting things. I mean, it's just like it seems like it's doing well. It's getting a lot of coverage. We paid a bigger PR company this time to go, hey, spread it out, do more than what we can do on our own, and that's been good.
Yeah.
So, but we're not getting any hate mail. That's happened before. It's like, I don't like this. Go back to your old sound. I'm like, okay, man. Okay, stranger. I'm going to spend all my time doing what you want me to do. Like, it's so funny. It's like, I'll never do what fans or anyone tells me what to do with the music. Never, ever, ever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't say that. I think that's lying to yourself. It's actually lying to fans. It's not like we're making a hamburger the same every time and selling a McDonald's. It's like,
yeah,
whatever we're doing, if you want to come along for the ride, cool. You might not like everything, but if we released it, we like it. That's just the purest, like, keep the music. It's like we never think, oh, we should go back to her Halo because her Halo was more popular. That wasn't never but that's not even even in discussion. It's just like, let's just go back and finish this story or start the story properly, and so it makes sense. So, but yeah, it's interesting being in a band.
well, I can tell you from the promotional aspect of things that I've seen the band in my inbox a lot more for this album than the last release. I think that the publicity, I mean, there's been a bombardment. Like, I'm going in Microsoft Outlook here and I was just looking, I typed in Teramaze, and I've been hit pretty hard with a lot of emails about the album, more so than I would probably say a lot of other publicists are hitting people with it.
I wonder if that's from the PR that we hired because he's American, or that's from our PR because we've got like a small PR thing that we're building. It's interesting to know, try to find out where, how people are getting the music, I suppose, because that's that other side to it. That's, I'm a musician. I'm not a promoter, but I'm trying to learn that side.
Yeah.
I'm trying to learn every side. Like, we literally do everything from start to finish now, but it's like we're not that great at some of this other stuff. We do the music. Okay, so but the PR thing is still a bit of a mystery. I mean, I suppose it's part of the sort of like fun of it too. It's like, who's going to hear the music? I know we've ended up on way more sites that are more metal sites over the last couple of months that we don't usually promote on, which is fine. I mean, it's like, it's still metal. It's just progressive. So, yeah, that's another thing. Music doesn't cost anything. Go and try to pay a PR company to promote your music. You're talking out thousands of dollars.
Well, I can tell you, I'm looking in here right now. I'm logged into here, and since April 5th, I have about 25 emails about the record, which, believe it or not, is a lot more than what I would normally get. It's all from the same person. It's a lot more than what I would normally get from a lot of bands that I would say are, have a larger fan base than you.
Interesting. That's good to know, actually.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot
Still,
in there.
it's all still trial and error, the promotional side of it.
It is, but here's what I'll tell you. When you pay a publicist, and there's some of these publicists that I've been dealing with for over 25 years, it's really a matter of what is their reach and how much are they really, because here's what happens. And this is, I call it I call it lost in the system, is that you have so many publicists who have all these lists, and each one of them is sending you emails about a band. And sometimes it's luck whether somebody will discover a new band. I have one day a week where I just go through emails and look for bands I've never heard of, right? And I still cannot get to everything that is sent to me. Now, if there's bands I already know, like you guys and a lot of others, it's easy for me to go and pick that out. But I think what happens is there is some trial and error with it. And it's a matter of the network that these folks have had. And if you notice, a lot of the guys that the labels typically hire typically have been around quite a bit and have a very, very, either they got their email list from somebody else that was around before them, or they've been around a very, very long time. I mean, I've done this for a quarter of a century now, and I can tell you the people that I've known the longest, usually I get the most emails from. Now, this PR company you use, I've dealt with him in the past and for maybe 10 years now. And, you know, again, he does a pretty good job as far as getting a lot of emails and promos sent out and making them stand out. And it's all about doing that. It just becomes, because you have so many record labels and publicists, and each label is paying, you know, the band, really, the label's making the band pay for, usually, for the publicist. And they might have 80 bands on the roster, might have 20 releases coming out. So it is trial and error. I mean, that's how it was a lot different back 20 years ago, where you didn't have as many bands putting stuff out.
Yeah.
Now it's different.
Yeah. I mean, labels used to be the filter, I suppose, for, labels don't really sign shitty bands. You can think they're shitty, but they can see that, you know, we can make money off this. It's the only reason labels. So they used to be the filter for, you know, the influx of just millions of bands. And it's like, now there's no filter.
Yeah. Well, right. And it was funny. Last year I went and I found a computer I had, an old computer. I fired it up. It still worked. And I used that machine from 1998 until about 2002. 2003 maybe. And, you know, all my old emails are in there. And I got curious. I'm like, how many emails how many emails did I receive? How many albums, you know, give or take? So it's funny. I did a podcast on this, and the amount of emails I was getting about releases, I probably would, you know, a week, maybe 20 emails a week, you know, about various releases. You know, each email may have 1 or 2 albums in it, maybe. So you're talking maybe 40 albums a month, 30 albums a month, maybe 20, right? And you're talking probably 60 emails, you know, in a month. Well, now I'll get 500 emails in a week. And the crazy thing is, instead of, you know, last year I counted as much as I could. I every time I get a new email, I'd write a tally. Like I'd hit a hash mark, and I think it was like 500, 600, 700 albums that were sent to me in a year, when I would maybe, before that, I'd maybe get 50. That's how different it is.
But your page has grown and your radio's grown. You know,
it has. But again, it's one of those things where you have so much stuff coming at you. If you're somebody like me, even if I had a team of like 20 people, I probably couldn't get to everything.
I still think word of mouth, not just word of mouth as in like physical word of mouth, but like, hey, check this song out to someone's mate. Like, that's what if I can say anything that's happened new with Eli, is new fans that have only just heard like Standing Ovation or something, and they're like into that style of music. They absolutely love it. They're like, oh, what's this? And then they're like, oh, you've got like 8,000 albums you've done. So, they're, I sometimes see on Bandcamp, some dude just buys a whole discography. Never seen his email before. Like, boom, some other guy. So I'm seeing with this time around, a lot newer fans, and Facebook. Facebook's weird, man. It's sort of like the band grows to here, and it just sort of just hovers there. And I'm like, what's going on? Like, but we're getting like probably, I don't know, 100 new people a week at the moment. Brand new people that, are into this style of music. And that's been cool because it's always sort of, it's always nice to have new people find your music that you've been doing forever. So, but is that the PR or is it just the internet? It's hard to know what's doing. I suppose that's the thing with the digital world. It's hard to know what's doing the work. If it's PR, it's the videos, or it's Spotify, or it's word of mouth.
I think it's
a combination of everything. But
I think it's a combination. So I can tell you that it's weird because it's a combination of things, because here's what happens. Like when I post about a band people may not know about, or I may post about an album that people may have forgotten about, or whatever, I'll always get messages like, thanks for keeping me in tune with some of this stuff I never would have found out about. And so there is some word of mouth because technically they're going by what I say. At the same time, what is the first thing that they probably do? They're not going and ordering a CD. They're going on YouTube or they're going on Spotify and typing in the band name and then checking it out. And I cannot tell you how many messages that I get where people have like thanked me for that. And I'm sure there's a lot of other people out there that do what I do. They get the same thing, but I think the word of mouth is definitely there. But I sort of view Spotify as like the new version of radio in a sense, because terrestrial radio really isn't obviously what it used to be. I mean, that's what I did for a very, very long time. But in a sense, Spotify's a lot like radio, except you can go and punch a band name in, and the bands get royalties when something, if you want to call it that, when something gets played. Just like in real radio, they end up getting royalties for it. And I think the word of mouth thing stems from there. I just think the thing that's different is there are so many more bands, and it's hard to focus large groups of people into one direction. But I think when you're talking about new fans, I get new followers every single day, and it's crazy how many. What's crazy about Facebook? You say it's weird because I'll get a crazy amount of hits. Like the post might reach 2-3 million people, and I might get like 1,000 followers out of it, right? I mean, it's crazy stuff like that, and it is kind of weird. Like people see it, but again, word of mouth is huge because then other people will share it. And I've had posts where somebody shares it. You're like, how the hell did this go viral? How did I reach this post, like 3 million people? Like what's going on? It's weird. I totally get it. I totally get where you're coming from.
That's the other that sort of raises this other sort of question with we get asked to go and play at all these places in the world, but we really have no gauge of how big we are in certain places. And I'll look at, sometimes my gauge will be, I'll look at other bands around our same size-ish, and they're touring like South America or they're touring Europe. And I'm like, well, we seem like we're the same size from like listens on Spotify and Facebooks and blah, blah, blah. So could we do that? It's all guessing. Like we're sort of guessing. Like I'll look at Spotify, and I know Spotify is not the only gauge, but it's some kind of gauge. We can see in each country, town, city, how many people are listening to us in that month. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So we kind of go, but I look at that and go, well, if those people come to a show we could do like 50 shows in America. It might only be like 500 people each show, but I'm like, that's still that would make sense for us to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to go and do it, because it would cost a fortune to tour America. Like we have people every day. I know it's hard to explain. It's like the whole come to Brazil thing. Actually, Brazil now is our second biggest listener, and I don't know how that happened, because it never used to be. It just kind of went. There's America, Brazil, and then like Europe sort of spread out, and there's sort of Australia. But I'm like, yeah, we'll come to Brazil, but we have no gauge that will rock up there and anyone's going to come. That's like, that's the hardest thing with the band at the moment. We go to Europe and we headlined Prog Power Europe, and like we're like, well, how are we the main band? Just Australian band. So we sort of, and then we get there and we've got like a lot of sort of fans, and then I'm like, we should have done more shows or something. And like, that's still hard for us to sort of go, well, yeah, because it probably cost us easy, probably 20 grand if we were to set up a tour, small tour around Europe. It's going to cost us that. So if we make that back, we would do it. If it was just cut even, you know what I mean? Like, even if we lost a bit of money, we'd probably still do it. But we have no kind of gauge until we sort of do it, I suppose, which is what we're sort of looking at right now. It's like America and Europe, like even in Australia, we still don't know. Sometimes we'll play to like a lot of people, and sometimes we play to none. It's like, it's a strange thing. I don't know if it's just our style of music, but
the problem with America is that your main media hubs, you have most of them on the eastern half of the country. Then you got to traverse this entire huge section to get out to California. Or in your case, if you go to California first, because it's obviously closer, then you got to go through all these, like, you got to go through basically the middle of nowhere to get to Chicago, and then you go from there. In Europe, it's a little bit easier because
just so close to each other.
Yeah, everything's close. Latin America and South America have always been crazy. There was a band, and I don't remember who it was, a very big band that was playing to like, I don't know, 60, 70,000 people there. And I'm like, well, how many albums do you sell down there? And they're like, we don't know. We may not sell any, but they somehow had all these people showing up because they were bootlegging everything.
Yeah. We actually, is it Sao Paulo, if I'm saying it right? That's probably one of the biggest places that listens to our music at the moment. Yeah. And I'm like, going by per listener just on Spotify, we would probably play to 2,000 of our own fans.
Yeah.
We think. We get there and play to like the dude behind the bar cleaning glasses. We don't know.
You could get there and play to the bartender, or you can get there and have 10,000 people wanting to get into the club. You don't know. Yeah.
I've seen people put our name on like fake posters with like Megadeth and all this, and like what bands they want to see playing in all those sort of places. And I'm like, who's doing all this? Like, we'd go and play there for sure if we just had a gauge, or at least like someone there knows that, hey, we could get 1,000 people in here. I was like, okay, then we'll spend our own money and come and play. But for some reason, that's the hardest thing right now for us. It's like, we know a fair few other bands that are all about sort of similar size wise, but they're more over there. They're in Europe and they're in America, and it's like, I've got another band, Mashiach, that we were supposed to tour with Testament for 30 shows just before the pandemic. I'm like, we still had, and that's a sort of smaller band, probably easier to promote because it's just metal. But there's no gauge other than probably just going and spending the money. And like, if we lose out, then we lose out. If we don't, then we find out. That's literally where we are right now with all this. I just wish we had some sort of guarantee that, hey, you'll be playing with at least 300 people.
Yeah,
but
I gotcha.
It's a weird thing.
Well, I do appreciate you coming on. Definitely a lot of fun. The album is great.
Thank you.
I definitely have it up there, probably with my top 2 or 3 albums that you've done. And
What's your favorite Teramaze album?
so it would probably be somewhere between this album, Her Halo, or Esoteric Symbolism. Those 3 albums. And it's weird because, you know what I mentioned about this new album? The last 3 songs at Esoteric are also my favorite songs on that album.
Yeah.
And I think right, and I think the guitar solos in the very last song are still probably some of my favorite solos I've ever heard you play. In all seriousness,
What song?
In Vitro.
Oh, yeah. We're trying to learn that stuff now. Yeah.
But I think I like the mix. Like when I think of this album and Her Halo, I like the mix of the heaviness and a lot of the more progressive melodic stuff that you've done, over, say, some of the heavier albums, like maybe Anadonia, which is more kind of straightforward, for example. So I think that when you have this kind of mix between it, I think, because I don't know what to expect from the record.
Yeah.
Probably the best way. It's probably the best way to really put it. I don't know what to expect. Look, when I heard this album and I'm listening to it, I didn't know what to expect from it. And parts of it reminded me of Her Halo, parts of it did not.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I liked about it.
Interesting. Yeah. No, that's good. Good to know.
It had that same vibe with some of the songs, but at the same time, it wasn't like a clone, and it wasn't like a record that I would say, man, it just copied Her Halo. It's kind of like it wasn't to the point where I was like, like you listen to an AC/DC album, you've heard all of them, right? It's not like that. I was happy where I could hear something that was similar, but at the same time, it was a lot different. The last song in the album, the long song in the album, is a lot different, in my opinion, than a lot of the stuff you've done. That's just my opinion.
Interesting. Yeah.
Whereas, and then you go from this heavy Her Halo kind of vibe song and Standing Ovation, and then you go to something completely different with Hands Are Tied, and then you go right into this last long kind of epic song. I think for me, that made the record for me.
Interesting.
But it would be somewhere between those 3 records, to be honest with you. Esoteric was the second album I had heard from you guys. I think I heard Anadonia and that one around the same time. It was about the time I got into the band. And Her Halo, obviously, Out of Subconscious is probably one of my favorite songs you've ever written. But I'll be honest with you, these last 3 tracks on this new album are right up there with it. Probably 3 of my favorite tracks you've ever done. So it's hard to say. It's really hard to say. It depends on the day. I actually had to go back and listen because I'm going to record a review of the album probably next week. But I actually had to go back and listen. Usually I listen to a band's discography to get some perspective, to kind of go back, unless it's like Iron Maiden or somebody like that where I've heard the albums a million times. But I went back to listen to all of the other albums, and it gives me a little bit of a perspective of like, okay, how do I view this? Right. And I came to the conclusion, and judging by the amount of plays I've had looking in my phone or looking on a computer when I'm listening to it while I'm doing work, I came to the conclusion that I like this album, probably in my top 2 or 3.
Yeah, cool.
And that's how I would put it. I know it's a kind of a long-winded answer.
No, I don't usually ask many people, but I thought, I know you've known the band for a while, and it's like, it's interesting to suppose I hear it instead of looking a message or something. It's like,
so, but it's kind of like I always look at things for perspective, because sometimes I could go back to Esoteric and have this memory of really loving the record, and maybe I don't like it as much. Maybe I like this album and the last 3 albums maybe better, right? But I always go back to get perspective on it, listen to this stuff again, get it back in my mind. That way I can go and do a review and think, okay, I can go back and maybe reference it if I want to, right? And kind of give people my perspective of how I viewed the band over the years. And that's kind of how I try to do reviews. The thing is, a lot of people will do reviews where they'll go and they'll start dissecting songs. I don't do that, dude. Like that, most people don't care about that. I care about, how do I feel about this record? What songs do I like? What does it remind me of? And what I'll do is I'll say, hey, I like this album and this album by this band. They're my favorites.
Yeah.
That usually gives people a perspective of where I'm coming from, right?
Yeah.
Like if I go,
Yeah, I'd actually say that Eli is probably in between a combination of Halo and Esoteric. It's actually in there a bit, especially the song, Madam Roma. It's probably a little bit heavier, the more heavier song on Eli. I kind of felt like, oh, this is a little bit something like Esoteric that had the riffs in there and stuff. So that just happens randomly. But so to me, Esoteric is still probably one of our best albums.
Totally agree, man. I think that is the album that really made me love the band. I think because I try not to be that, oh my God, they haven't done anything as good as this since then. I try not to, like, some people will like not really give a new album by a band a chance and they're stuck on one record. That happens a lot. I try to look at everything with a pretty open mind on stuff. And I mean, like I said, Esoteric, man, was like the standard for me. And then her Halo came out, which I liked better. And it's kind of like, I listen to a new album and kind of give it a chance. I let it grow on me after a while. I've been listening to the album probably for easily, I mean, it's June now, for probably a month and a half pretty intently. And then I don't like to review things right away because some of my favorite records, I didn't like them at first.
Yeah.
I just, how it happens. So I give it some time and then I'm like, okay, I really don't like this, or I really do like this, or and I've done reviews so quickly sometimes in the past, and then I go back like 2 weeks later, I was stupid. Why the hell did I do that? Yeah, so I like to give it some time, and then if it's like a live album or something like that, that's a little bit different. But I like to give it some time before I review it, and that's really where I'm at with a lot of albums. That's why people are like, man, why didn't you review this album? I just got the full promo like 2 days ago.
I won't know if I like this album for another year.
I mean, it could, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say that long for me, but I got to give it at least a week or two of like constantly listening to it.
Yeah, I think especially this style of music, because there's a lot in there. There's just a lot in, that's the sort of fun of this style of music. Put a lot in there, but try to make it still sound like it makes sense.
Yeah.
But someone that is not into progressive music can still listen to it. That's actually that's consciously what I try to do.
Yeah.
Is try to make the melodies that like anyone could sort of listen to. My mum likes it. She's not a progressive. You know what I mean? It's like, she's like the melodies. I'm like, okay, so it's still.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at the cover for Esoteric right now, and and I'm thinking, with the top like 3 albums by you, it just really depends on the day for those 3 records. But I could tell you, I could separate these 3 albums from the other ones as far as how much I like them.
Yeah.
So it's like probably it's easily top 3. I probably would lean on her Halo maybe a little bit more, but I'd probably have this one at 2 or, probably at 2 or 3. It's really hard for me to gauge.
Cool.
I'll know more. I'll have more of a thought on that in a week when I do it, but it's close. I would probably say it's right on par with Esoteric in my opinion, and her Halo I like just slightly better.
Yeah. It's funny. The weirdest thing happened, and I couldn't make this happen even if I tried. The length of Eli is the exact same length as her Halo to the second. It's so weird, man. I thought I was daydreaming it when I looked at I went to do the master. I was like 56:35, and I'm like, that sounds familiar.
That is crazy, dude.
Yeah, man.
And I just opened up iTunes and I'm looking at it because I have the songs in my computer. And you were right. 8 songs, 57 minutes for both of the albums.
Well, yeah, it's exactly 56:35. They must have just rounded it off. But
Yeah.
I screenshot it and sent it to the guys. And I'm like, there's no way I could have done this. You know, I mean, there's no way that I've moved the songs. It wouldn't make any difference. The songs are at the length that they are. There's barely even any time in between the songs because I wanted them all to flow. And I was just laughing. I was like, I could not make that happen even if I tried. I don't know why, but maybe we just do things the same. We're constantly in it like a loop. That's kind of what
Have you posted it as a fun fact yet? You should.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I don't think people believe me, but I'm like, I couldn't, not that I'd even try to make that happen because it's like, the music would probably suffer if I'm trying to make it. You know what I mean? So it's so weird, but here we are trying to make an album feel like her Halo. It's the exact same length. I'm like, that's just.
And what's
weird.
funny is 2 of the songs on Eli are like intros.
Yeah.
Like a minute long. It just has longer songs. Whereas like her Halo, you have a lot of 4 and 5 minute songs on that album.
Yeah. The intros had to be put as songs because I didn't want people to have to fast forward the intros, but the intros made sense to the to the concept. So I'm like, well, we'll just put them as songs. But I'm like, they're not. They're just bits of music. You know what I mean? They're like, but then the songs would have been longer if I joined them together. It still would have been the same length, but so that's a fun fact. I was going to delete it, and it's the same length.
That is cool, man. Well, hey, I enjoyed having you on the show. That's a pretty fun fact. But definitely another great record. Probably easily one of the best albums you've put out. As we just talked to the last 5-10 minutes about. Again, thanks for coming on. It was great. I'll definitely let you know when I put the interview up, and congrats on another great record, dude. I can't wait. I'm like now hearing you talk about the next album, not sounding like this. I'm really eager to hear it.
Sounds nothing like it.
Assuming you use those songs that don't come up with better ideas.
Yeah, I'm using them. There's a lot there, but I did find an old song that I like now and we're using, but it's all brand new. It's all new. It was all written through the production of Eli.
Gotcha, man. Well, hey, thanks for coming on. It was awesome.
I appreciate it.